Right.
Well, quite frankly, I don't know what I am, sexually speaking. I've been through a lot of trauma, religious and otherwise, and a lot of secondhand trauma, and I don't know what I am. It's been difficult. I'm here in my 30s now, and I'm just finally starting to get to a point where I feel comfortable exploring things, and it's weird, it's difficult, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could just take a blood test and find out that, okay, yeah, I'm apparently 70% gynophilic and about 30%, interested in penises or whatever it might be. But unfortunately, that's just not the nature of it. And I recognize how distorted all of these things can be because of past trauma, because of social pressure, because of, current circumstances and expectations and all of that. So while I definitely recognize that tension, I hope that I can just let you know here at the start that it's okay not to know. And as much as you might want to know, that it's all right to be sort of fumbling around in the dark on these issues.
Sure is fucking uncomfortable, though, isn't it?
It is. I've been to some gay bars, and I've really enjoyed that. And I've really enjoyed some company with women, too. But the second it starts turning sexual, I am checked out. I am gone. I am gone. I have ghosted many people, unfortunately, as soon as it turned sexual in nature. Growing up, I had an older sister who was trans, about 18 months older than me. She was not encouraged to explore anything about herself. And I think a lot of that message got to me, too, at a time when I was just starting to explore things. I remember my father took me to the graveyard down by our house, and he showed me everybody from his graduating class who died of an STD, and that was my sex talk. That's what I got from him.
Wow.
And it's been weird. I've had to recover from the abuse in a lot of other ways, and I'm just now getting to the sexual aspect of it, and I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing a lot of these trauma-type symptoms that we've been talking about. I should mention that it is, of course, possible that you yourself, the authentic you, the, version of yourself that didn't have these experiences may in fact be asexual, may in fact be averse to sex.
Part of the reason I'm thinking, I don't know. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that asexuality was a possibility, I'd be like, yep, I'm bi, we're good.
Yeah.
But in fact,
well, and that is inherently possible.
I saw Cabaret a while back, and the dancers on stage, both the men and women, had abs you could grind meat on, and it was glorious. I loved every minute of it.
Fair to say.
Yes.
So, I can't rule that out, and I don't want to try as a stranger on the internet. But from what you're describing, it does sound like these are pretty typical, pretty common trauma responses, and it sounds like you've had traumatic experiences. So I think that we, at the very least, can put a little bit of a loose label on what we're talking about and give you some idea of the types of things that might be useful, because this does sound like a trauma response and is likely, as Darrel's been saying, to respond to different trauma therapies.
Well, there's been a lot of different trauma. I mean,
I'm sure.
My ex-wife thought she could fix me by not listening to me when I said no. That did not help.
I'm sure that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to ask one personal question.
I've been going. Yeah, go ahead.
And you don't have to answer this, so don't feel like you have to. Do you have?
Well, if I answer it, I'll answer it honestly.
Okay. What's your sex life with yourself?
Oh, as far as masturbation goes?
Right.
Fairly often. Maybe once a day, maybe every other day. I don't like porn in which people love each other. If that makes sense. I don't like seeing people actually enjoy each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. It makes a lot of sense. That's why porn is produced that fits your needs, because there's other people that are just like you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Millions of people.
I think it's great when other people have sex. I love that. It's amazing. It's a wonderful thing. It just scares the hell out of me to be involved with it myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What trauma does is it...
I guess I identify as traumatized.
Yeah. I mean, what trauma does is it changes a part of you. It makes a part of you sort of work to try to keep you surviving all the time. And so that part of you is not necessarily aligned with the rest of you, because it can't be. It has to watch out all the time for what it has learned through the traumas you've experienced is dangerous.
Right.
And so it's not at all surprising when you go through that sort of thing so much when as you're progressing in your development, that you would be confused and feel like there's so much contradiction in the way that you're experiencing things and wanting things. And maybe you want it until a certain point, and maybe you want something, but only if it's not too close to you or something like that. It's not at all surprising, because there is a part of you, probably a very significant part, that is working specifically to try to protect you from things it thinks are dangerous. And that part of you can't admit to being the way that you are, whatever that way turns out to be.
You've actually described avoidant behavior, and that's the clue I'm guessing you're picking up on, Sarah. And that's a key clue for a lot of trauma. You're kind of like the cat. I don't know. You know that old story about the cat that jumped on the stove all summer long, and then when winter came and they built a fire, the cat jumped on it, got his feet burned, and never went back, summer or winter, never went back on top of the stove. You've been burned, and you're burned really bad at some point in your life, and you're continuing. You've overlearned. You could enjoy sleeping on the stove in the summertime, but you've overlearned, and that's what trauma does. You overlearn to avoid certain stimuli, and it sounds like in this case it's sex in certain situations that you're avoiding. Does that sound right or not? I mean, I could be full of shit. I don't know.
That sounds right. I mean,
so what?
I've been through some shit. I've definitely gotten burned.
There's a number of different kinds of therapy that can work with the very thing you're talking about. And I'm not going to sit here, number one, I'm not going to diagnose you. And number two, I'm not going to recommend therapy.
No, that'd be irresponsible.
Yeah, right. But I will say, I'm guessing there are some therapies. Exposure therapy might be one area that could be useful for you. You might also have some other areas that might be useful, but you're going to need to go find somebody. Have you ever tried therapy?
I've been going to therapy off and on for about 8 years now. Found a therapist who works pretty well for me.
Okay.
I haven't broken this part of it to him because I wasn't ready to explore sexuality at all then.
Okay. Do you feel safe exploring sexuality with this therapist?
I don't know. by all technicality, he was trained as a religious counselor, and he ended up falling to atheism himself. So I don't know how qualified he would be to discuss this. It might make him very qualified. It might make him not qualified at all.
Go in and talk to him. Ask the therapist if he knows anything about trauma, and ask him specifically about religious trauma. Just have a discussion with him about it. See where he goes with it.
I'd be interested to hear what he says about his competency or his interest level in these issues, because I can say that, I mean, Darrel and I both had religious education before getting to this point, to this table, to have this discussion. So, he may or may not be the right fit for you or for these issues, but I'd have that conversation. I'd really encourage that.
And part of you is not going to feel safe with this, just period, because it's a thing that you've been trained to not feel safe with.
Right. Johnathan, let me make the same suggestion I made to Charlie. I don't know if you were listening at the very first caller today.
I was trying to.
Okay. Well, I know the complications. And that is, and I find this as a therapist, it really works beautifully. And that is, when you're in that office, in some ways you're paralyzed. You may not be able to say what you really want to say, or feel what you really want to feel, or express it, or there may not be any avenues, or I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why people don't say what's really bugging them in a therapy session. And you can wait 6 months or 8 years to tell them, or you can sit down tonight after this phone call and sit down. Here's all the things that are bugging me, and just keep a list for the next few days until you go back to see your therapist or whenever. And then when you go in, say, I've got a list of things, I want to give them to you, and I want to think about how we can attack these things, how we can move on these issues. In writing, it helps the therapist a lot, because then the therapist will go through each one of those, and you have initiated it. You're not asking the therapist to read your mind. That's the problem. A lot of clients go into a therapeutic office thinking, well, they can read my mind, or I have such a good relationship with a therapist, I really like them. And then you kind of jump to the conclusion, well, they must be able to read my mind because they seem to hit the button every now and then. But no, you really have to give therapists a lot of help to help you. We're not mind readers.
I mean, it's my brain. I'm the only one who's got a window into it.
Yeah. How do you feel about writing all this stuff down in detail, and write as much detail? If he's a good therapist, he will think, damn, this is great. Thanks for giving it to me. I mean, you just saved yourself $1,000 in therapy because we can do it a lot faster.
Fair point.
I have spent so much money on therapy.
Yeah, right. Well, here's the key. If you're not making progress,
money well spent. Money well spent.
If it is money well spent, then you can say I've made a lot of progress, and you can measure that progress. So I'm very suspicious of therapists who never seem to get the results, but they keep people feeling comfortable with coming and paying their money. So.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot of work ahead, but it also sounds like you've been doing a lot of that work. So, I would encourage you, like Darrel said, to be able to bring these things up, to let your therapist know that these are your concerns, and to trust and know that you don't have to fix anything at any particular speed, at any particular rate. If you and your therapist begin to work on these issues and you all of a sudden feel incredibly flooded and overwhelmingly uncomfortable being in that space, that is okay. Like Sarah said, it's never going to be easy. It's never going to feel like a spa day. It is going to be tough to sit in that office and to sit in that space, but it doesn't need to be miserable. And if you are killing yourself in order to get well, I would encourage you to allow yourself to take a step back, to catch your breath, and to know that you don't have to sort these things out at any particular speed.
Yeah, I feel like I've gotten pretty good about moderating my progress in that regard. But therapy is emotionally and sometimes almost physically exhausting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It demands a lot of me, a lot of thinking and a lot of engaging, and
right.
I definitely feel it afterwards.
I believe that.
But it's worth it. It's worth it. It's been worth it every time.
Good.
Put a lot of work in. You got a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. And best of luck as you're beginning to ask these questions. And I would just, I guess, encourage you once again to remember that there's never going to be an answer or the answer. These are going to be questions. Who am I? What is my sexuality? What do I like? What do I want? How do I be? What do I do? Those are questions that you're going to get to ask for the rest of your life. And that's kind of the pleasure and the joy of being alive. So I hope that you don't feel pressure, but that I'm so glad to hear that you're beginning to open these doors.
Johnathan, you said you were looking at my book, The God Virus, when we first started.
Yeah.
I'd almost recommend you read another book before that one, although I would recommend you read both books, of course.
So go ahead and order it for later, and then read a different one.
Read Sex and God. Read Sex and God. Our Religion Distorts Sexuality. I think that may actually have some...
That was on the recommended.
Yeah, I think that'll actually have some stuff you might find very... And both books will, but this one speaks more to the issue you called about. Thanks for calling tonight.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care. Yeah, when we said we were going to talk about religious trauma, I didn't have any illusions about the type of calls that we'd be getting, about the type of territory we'd be going into. But what I guess I am sort of surprised and not surprised about is so many similarities in these themes and how incredibly common these things are. I would say to all of our callers, I would say to everyone listening that there's a reason why this is like a recognizable syndrome, that this is a cluster of symptoms, that there are incredible books and speakers and all of these different pieces to this, because I think nearly everybody who is drawn towards the ACA and the Atheist Experience Network at some point is experiencing a lot of these types of symptoms.
Yeah. And, we've heard it from all three callers, basically, or not all three, the second one not, but that people talked about missing, they didn't use the words, but I miss my childhood or I miss my adolescence. You heard, both the first and third caller, they both expressed those kinds of ideas.
Yeah.
That's one of the key problems with religious indoctrination around sexuality is it just makes you miss important stuff. And then you got to go back and pick it up. You got to do something. As an adult, you need to function as an adult, not as a teenager anymore, and yet you missed your teenage years and so forth.
And there's a lot of work to be done around that. I mean, I know that I drove my personal therapist crazy because I spent like 6 months complaining about how I never got to have prom sex, which I know is a silly thing, but it felt like an important one. Oh, was it? Was it? Rub it in.
It was big. Yeah, you really missed out.
And so whether it's prom sex or, being able to hold hands, that first kiss, whatever it might have looked like for anybody listening right now, I just want to say that, yeah, it may be true that you can't get those experiences back and you can't go back in time, but there is so much opportunity for healing, and there is so much that you can regain and opportunities that you can take on. So there's a lot to be excited about.